We are live. Welcome to my completely spoiler-free for the show review of 2025's MCU show Ironheart. I will only be spoiling the MCU leading up to the show, not anything that happens on the show itself. The show is rated PG-13, so will this video be. And yeah, absolutely love this show. Let's see, I think I'm going to start by the replacement for Tony Stark. And I gotta say, I really don't agree that that's the case at all. Riri Williams, who we met in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, is partially inspired by Tony Stark, but she's really more of a counterpoint to him, similar to, over the course of his solo films, we met, although they tended to be villains, not heroes, but yeah, Ironmonger, Whiplash, Sam Rockwell playing a dorkable version of himself that's kind of annoying and makes you wish he would have gone with a cooler kind of character that he does elsewhere. And I am afraid I don't remember Guy Pearce's character's name in the third... Aldrich Killian, that's it. I'm not one of the people who thinks that he's a bad character, not in the slightest. I've always been happy when Guy Pearce showed up in something. But yeah, with each of, with Riri, like each of those, in some significant way, there's a difference between her and Tony Stark, and that's part of what it's about. At no point in this did I feel like they were saying that I should feel the same way about Riri Williams that I, but at this, especially at this point, than I did for Tony Stark after multiple movies. Yeah, as usual, the anti-woke YouTube chuds are lying to you. I don't know what else to say. If they're saying or writing something, assume it's a lie, if you can't verify it as true. But yeah, basically, Riri, she was at MIT. She's got the suit, but the fact that she's been selling her, services as homeworker is discovered, and she's also not been completely perfect on not creating damage to let's see, property damage, I guess is the term. And you know how when a black person in America causes property damage, I mean, yeah, we are lucky that they don't call the cops and have her shot. That might actually be the least realistic thing about this show. Was that too dark? I'm Danish. We like dark humor, morbid humor. Anyway, yeah, she is expelled from MIT and goes back to Chicago and, tries to find another way to get into a situation where she can build the suit. The psychological accuracy here is through the roof. It is not in the slightest a spoiler to tell you Riri has PTSD. Her best friend, Natalie, and her stepfather, they were, let's see, yeah, they died. This is said almost immediately in the show. And basically, you get the sense that she is building the suit so as to escape from that, and maybe in the hopes that it can prevent it from happening again down the line, similar to how, Peter Parker, with Uncle Ben, Batman with his parents, trying to, it's essentially magical thinking, but it's a mix of magical thinking and empathy for others, not wanting the bad thing that happened to you to happen to others. And I really loved the way PTSD was handled in Iron Man 3, but I think it's actually even better here. And part of that is, of course, that they have more running time. It's such a complex issue that you do need more than, that movie's like, what, 2 hours, 2.5, something like that, And yeah, here we see just more depth to the PTSD. And let's see, various other characters are also, I don't think I'd say there's even one character that wasn't psychologically accurate here, and they managed to really dig deep. The authenticity is phenomenal. This was actually shot in Chicago, and I've never been, and I'm not African American, so I am just going to note that based on what I've heard, African Americans and or Chicagoans say, this seems like it is genuinely just like, yeah, this is what it's like there, And let's see. Yeah, so the level of detail varies. There were definitely things where there's this one major aspect of the show where I wasn't entirely sure what the limitations were to a certain thing, and yeah, they they're trying to do more visual and less like explaining. There was a while where they would explain a lot in perhaps not so much the MCU, but certainly comic book movies, and I think this one goes a little bit too far away from explaining, because there was something where I was, yeah, by the end of it, I still wasn't sure exactly what the deal was there. So the tone tends to, yeah, it's largely the gritty kind of, for that we're used to from the MCU by now, and let's see, with some like playful stuff. The dialogue is quite good. Everyone really feels like they have their own voice. I noticed there were some characters who hardly ever spoke, and when they did, a lot of the time it was like these very short lines that don't, and then there's other characters who are like constantly talking, and even like there was one character at one point, they're trying to say something nice and they can't help but say something not very nice because that's just them. This is one of those, I love when you have a piece of media where if you just read a line written for a character without knowing what character it is and without the benefit of seeing their face, seeing the face or hearing the voice of the actor delivering it, but you just read the words and immediately you're like, I know what character would say that. That's such a great, when you can do that and it works for it, it's really great. Yeah, all in a lot of ways, this is about what you'd expect from an MCU Disney Plus show. You know, I would argue none of these have been just like incompetently made. Just, some of them, it's not like the best thing ever. Um, let's see, but yeah, the various like technical aspects, and they deliver, and their ability to deliver. What's that thing called again? Four quadrants. To try to appeal to, you know, try to have something that appeals to almost any one kind of thing. And in some ways they've moved away from some of that more recently. Yeah, the direction is great. There is a lot of the time a strong sense of visuals. Here, I don't know that it ever. It's let's see. It's rarer for it to be like flat and boring and just like, you know, yeah. Part of it is definitely, this is very much not like set. This is not overusing the volume. It is set in the real world. If most places in the show feel like you can reach out and touch them, and a bunch of the time you hypothetically could, because they're on location, or they built a set. This is a place that actually, yeah, and yeah, this has one of the most compelling visual montages of the MCU so far. And yeah, the cinematography does a really great job. They tend to the I'm not sure that Flight has ever been filmed in a boring way in the MCU, and I really appreciate that. I'm glad they're keeping that up. And there's some really great choices made in editing that really help make things make certain scenes pop. I think that more or less brings us to the let's see. Right. Yeah, another part of editing is, of course, I don't think that this really has scenes that should just have been cut. And like while watching, there was one or two scenes where I felt like, oh, should this maybe have gone on longer? But then it turned out, oh, they're returning to that later. That's why it was cut a little, short there. But yeah, and the I felt like there was always movement. It's fairly dynamic. Sometimes the plot won't progress hugely for, you know, I guess I don't want to give away how long, but in that case, it's character stuff. I never felt like the show was spinning its wheels. And I definitely don't think that this should just have been like a movie. You would lose so much if you tried to trim this. It's 6 episodes. Yeah, it's longer than a movie. And it couldn't even really have been 2 because there's not really a natural place to stop halfway through. And yeah. Right, I guess I'll just briefly say, so yeah, right, I love each of the episodes. I think it has a very strong, season opener and season finale, and I just realized I forgot to mention, right now this only has 1 season. I don't know if it will ever get more than 1, but recently I've been doing these reviews after 1 season, and if they make another season and I end up feeling like I have a lot to add about 1 or more of those seasons, I'll make another video. I think... Yeah, the production value is really, really great. It feels like, it's not trying to be quite as expensive as the movies, the way that, let's see, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, later Captain America and the Winter Soldier, the show, that was definitely trying to be as expensive as the movies. But it doesn't feel cheap, which is very important when you're dealing with, this suit that, yeah. I thought they did a really great job on the fact that, I want to say it was Renegade Cut who made the point that, Tony Stark was upset by, weapons in the hands of these terrorists. So he goes out and builds a lollipop-colored WMD apparently the problem wasn't that dangerous weapons exist, it's that they're not in the hands of him, an alcoholic billionaire with, a spotty record. I might be paraphrasing for at least some of that, but yeah, Riri, her suit is not really meant as like a weapon, and yeah, I thought they did a really great job on that. Yeah, the costumes and makeup, fantastic. I think it's especially noticeable in this group of people who go on heists. And yeah, every single member, they did just such amazing work on that. Every single one of them, their personality really shines through their appearance before they open their mouths or we see them do anything. And let's see, I think, yeah, the music is also great. Emotional when it needs to be, exciting when it needs to be. The sound design is fantastic, extremely important for something like this, because like otherwise we're just not going to believe the Iron Tech suit. I know not everybody agrees with me on the following, so I'm just going to speak for myself here. I cared about every major character on this. Everyone who got, you know, enough screen time and, like, development and such. Yeah, every single one of them, like, to be clear, I'm not saying that I wanted everyone to end up, what's the word, getting a happy ending, but I am saying I cared about their ending. There is at least one character here that you don't necessarily want to have a, a happy ending. And yeah, the acting is solid. I'm not familiar with most of the cast here, but everyone really inhabits their characters. And this is also one of those where, like, there was at least one character on this that at first I thought, oh, this character's probably not really going to get depth. And I suppose by the end, there are ones that didn't necessarily get a lot of depth. They did get some. I don't know that there's any major character here who ends up just completely one note by the end. But they, yeah, I was impressed with how much depth they gave, characters who at first seem like, oh, this is just, they're serving a narrative purpose and that's it. So yeah, I thought they did a really good job on the pacing. It's a show that does have, like, these, there are times where you don't have a lot of where characters have limited windows to accomplish something, but they still manage to actually have time for thoughtful exploration of the issues. So I already mentioned PTSD. Money is a major theme here. More than one character points out, Tony Stark had money. That's how he was able to do this, which is also, yeah, it's not like he didn't do property damage. It's not like he, never made a mistake, did something that, a lot of people would consider ethically wrong, but he could get away with it for, yeah. They, which also segues nicely into, they bring up white privilege, male privilege, and let's see. I think that might just about cover. Yeah. Yeah, the special effects, really solid. Um, I don't think there was ever anything where I genuinely felt like, okay, I don't really believe what I'm seeing. This doesn't look like, yeah. Um, and let's see. They do a really good job of, I remember when Wakanda Forever came out, there was some concern about, oh wait, does this mean that, how are they going to deal with the suit? Because like we expected her to get a show before, or some kind of solo story before she was in someone else's thing, or maybe for her to then not have the suit in the thing where she's guest starring someone else's, but they, she has a completed suit at the very start of this, and then something happens and she has to fix it, and but she does, she has some access to a suit from early on in this, and I thought that was the right choice. Now that we've seen her in a suit, she had some really memorable moments in the suit in Wakanda Forever. Yeah, you definitely have to. What's the word? Um, it's going to be really frustrating if she spends a huge chunk of this not in one. I mean, Iron Man 3 was able to pull off something like that, but again, that was also a movie, not a show. If a huge chunk of this show didn't have, but at the same time, it doesn't end up feeling overexposed. Let's see. Or relied too heavily upon. They do manage to find reasons why she can't quickly and easily solve every problem with the suit. I think that does bring us to. So yeah, the humor here is the typical MCU, you know, humor. I did feel like they, a lot of the time here, made a sincere effort, and most of the time got there, of like, no, but yeah, there's jokes, but they come organically from the characters. It's not really that suddenly someone is just behaving in a weird way because it was thought to be funny. You know, in Thor 2, one of the things, in addition to the fact that it's really, really sanest, the fact that, Selvig runs around, some of the time naked, some of the time in underpants, without pants, it's just like, it doesn't have any connection to his character, though. I get that it's supposed to be a result of the mind control, and he was under mind control for a very long time, longer than anyone else. I saw some people say, well, what about, Hawkeye? Well, Hawkeye wasn't mind controlled for as long, though, and, you know, is it maybe also the fact that, when Hawkeye was under mind control, he shot some people, which he normally does, whereas Selvig, he shot people normally he wouldn't. Whereas Selvig built a machine that before he was under mind control, he didn't even know was possible. Not even like theoretically. Like, I feel like it makes sense that takes a strain on your mind. But they should either have just said, no, no, it doesn't. Because it's their thing. They could have just said, oh yeah, he have it happen off screen. He had therapy for a while. He's okay now. Something like that. But yeah, that doesn't come out of the character. It doesn't arise organically. Here, most of the time, it does. Like, the I don't know how much I want to give away. I'll just say, yeah. And also, I didn't feel like any character. I'm sure some will disagree with me on this. I didn't feel like even one character on the show was just the way they were, just because it was thought, oh well, that will be funny. Like, there was a character that I thought, you know, that would turn out to be the case. But yeah, by the end, they had actually added something to that character that I really didn't expect. Um, and yeah, honestly, this has some of my favorite characters of the MCU, and I hope that they do bring them back. Right now, it's really not. I can imagine this might not get a second season. I think it was Nano V Movies, sub to him if you haven't already, who pointed out they're not really focusing as much on the shows these days as they did earlier. You know, it seems like it hasn't really been as successful as they had hoped. Now, let's see. Yeah, the sci-fi. There's some really cool stuff. You know, it's we used to say it's not. You know, if Iron Man, yeah, if Iron Man is going to be in an MCU thing, there has to be some new invention of his. You know, and yeah, Tony is gone but not forgotten. This does have stuff we have not seen before in the MCU, and yeah, it's really really cool. Um, I think that might. Yeah, I'll. I refuse to give away these specifics. I will just say this does deliver something that we have been waiting for in the MCU for a long time, and you know, it's one of those things where like once the MCU really took off, we knew it's just a matter of time because it's such a big thing in the comics, and it's such an awesome thing in the comics. And you know, yeah, we were hoping for it. We were thinking this might actually be it. We got it. I loved it. Yeah, I I suppose if you haven't watched the show yet and you really badly want to know what it is, you know, drop a comment down below. I will respond letting you know what it is. And there are also other sources where you could learn it if you yeah, I think that's as close as I'm willing to get right here right now. Um anyway, the yeah, I did recently watch a video. I want to say it was Yara Zaid on Strange Days. It was really good. That's why right here, right now, is in my head. Anyway, yeah, the action, they do such a great job. At this point, you really have to put a lot of effort in to think of stuff we haven't seen an Iron Tech suit do. And I was very happy with what they came up with. It's you know, again, like I think it is important to keep in mind this is not trying to Riri is not trying to outdo Tony Stark's KD ratio. She's not trying to just take out a bunch of people. You know, the suit is essentially a tool. And yeah, that is a lot of the time in the like action scenes and such, that is how it's used. It's a very high-tech tool, and that I can understand if some people find that frustrating because now we've gotten used to, you know, oh well, when the suit comes out, you know, that's when people, you know, get blasted with repulsor blasts. Wow, it's been so long since I talked about repulsors, but yeah, you know, so, something like that. And yeah, that's not really the case here. You can perhaps think of it as like, yeah, I mean, let's see. Yeah, it's like a tool. You know, it allows her to fly. She could go places she otherwise couldn't. That's basically the idea, and it you know perhaps provides some protection. But yeah, I this has some of my favorites of like Iron Tech suit action, and I think that might yeah, tension and suspense are great. I already mentioned it doesn't overuse the suit. That also goes for like action scenes. It doesn't, you know, there are other types of action scenes here. One of the things that, you know, action scenes in this show feature, there are these two young women, referred to as the blood siblings. You know, basically yeah, they're martial artists, and you know they're not like it's one of those things. As soon as you have that, and you definitely should, if it makes sense for your story to have that, go ahead and have that. But as soon as you do, you gotta deal with all the frickin' conservative numbskulls whining about it. So they decided to not make these two girls like roided up muscly, because then conservatives would say, oh, they're ugly. And apparently every woman has to be sexually appealing to the male gaze, or they have no value. So that does, of course, mean that if they, when the blood siblings are physically taking on, men that are roughly their size or bigger, there's the thing, yeah, then the conservatives come out screaming about, oh, upper body strength, men have superior upper body strength. And that's why they were careful on this show to make it that it's rarer for the blood siblings to punch a guy around their size in the face and thus win, and more of the time they will do, let's see, I believe, it's been so long, but I want to say the Blockbuster Buster referred to it as fighting luchador style when he was talking about the Black Widow character in the first Avengers movie, and he pointed out, when you do that, you are using your body weight against them, and then you don't actually have to be quite as big or muscly as they are. That's one of the things they do. Sometimes they will, grab someone by the back of their head and slam their head hard into, into a surface that's really gonna hurt. And again, there it doesn't, upper body strength. The upper body strength of the person they're doing that to doesn't enter into it. You can't really, it's you can't really resist something like that. You can try to prevent it from happening, but yeah. They clearly put a lot of thought into making sure that these two characters would make sense in that. And it also makes their fighting very distinct. We have a lot of just, oh, they'll punch them in the face kind of thing, Yeah, there are times where the age rating is pushed as far as it will go. And I thought they did a good job of not, it shows things that earlier MCU might not have, and it didn't feel like they were just trying to be edgy. It was motivated by what they were trying to accomplish here. I really love the decision to have so early. It's been weeks since I watched. I think it might actually be the very opening of the very first episode, but certainly very early. You see this video shot by Riri and Natalie, and they do have that awkward thing where like it's supposed to be a video from 5 years ago, but then it doesn't really look like they ate, I don't know. Maybe they just, for some reason, seems like they didn't, they decided not to de-age, because like, I mean, Riri must be like in her 20s, right? So like 5 years prior, she'd be, a teenager, and I mean, early 20s. She must be in her early 20s. I believe she was supposed to be a teenager, those 5 years ago. It doesn't really look like, I don't quite know why they decide. I don't know, maybe, if I were to make a case for it, I think they didn't want people to just hyper focus on, oh, is the de-aging good? And I do think sometimes it worked better to just pretend like, no, just use your imagination. You're already using your imagination for some of this. Yeah, they aged. You can't see it, but you've been told it. Why do you need to see it? I respect that point of view. And I suppose it's also possible they were just like, maybe for once we shouldn't overwork and underpay the effects artists. Yeah, okay, that's definitely not what they thought it should be, but it wasn't. Um, well, they should stop entirely, not just, not only give them a little bit. Uh, Stop entirely on overworking and underpaying the effects artist. I think that might more or less, like the Black Panther movies, you can very much tell this was made by African Americans. Uh, uh, you know, uh, black people in general, and they're they clearly do care about the how things are for black people in America right now. Um, I think I might have already mentioned the various aspects of that. Um, yeah, I think, and yeah, there's, different parts of their culture show up and are not denigrated. Sometimes they're even celebrated, and I really appreciated how this. Oh, right. Okay. Shouldn't have to say this, shouldn't have to be the case. No, not every white person on this show is pure evil. Let's see. I, I personally think they're. It would be fine if it were, we've had so many where, minority characters are presented just inherently evil. I really don't think it would be, this terrible thing. Just yeah. Like ideally, try to explore, you know, what the what how it harms minorities when members of the majority choose to do evil, and it is a choice. That choice is easier the more money and power you have, but even if you are poor, even if you have very little, you can still make an effort to not be evil to, yeah, other people. Let's see. I think, and that is the thing. Like as soon as a minority is evil in one of these pieces of media, conservatives are like, oh no, but see, they're doing a thing there. It's exploring why they're evil, and a lot of the time, yeah, they are. And as long as there are characters in there that are not evil, because it's a big problem in, for example, America, with like there's countless pieces of media where minorities will be presented as just inherently evil, lesser than members of the majority, and it leads to hate crimes. Like we've seen it, during COVID. Trump kept insisting that, oh, this is, China's fault. Now, to be clear, the Chinese government, there's a tremendous amount of things they do that are terrible. I am not making any excuses for the Chinese government. But what he said didn't lead, the average American racist to, like, speak out against the Chinese government. It led to a bunch of them physically assaulting, East Asian immigrants to America, many of whom hate the Chinese government more than the racist. A lot of the harshest things I've seen said about the Chinese government have been from people who, you know, are not always first generation immigrants to the West, but sometimes descendants of. But yeah, their ancestry is Chinese, and yeah, they've done much more study of it than these racists have, who, you know, after 9/11 they attacked, like, was it like Sikh? There was at least one Sikh I remember hearing about being attacked because these these racists couldn't tell the difference between a Muslim and a Sikh, which, like, wow, really, really. They just saw someone who looked different than them, and so they used violence. And way too often, conservative media and politicians stoke the flames of resentment there, and so they end up, with people who don't have very much attacking people who have even less, sometimes killing them. People did die as you know, a result of the fear mongering around, oh, COVID, that's like a Chinese thing, which, like, especially when you do it with a virus, because that makes people think, oh, if I see an East Asian looking person, they have the virus. And at that point, they might think that it's self-defense to attack, even kill them, which is completely absurd. That you can't see from someone's ethnicity whether or not they've got COVID. And again, countless East Asians, like there were. I'm afraid I forget which country, but there was at least one East Asian country where they did amazing on and I think it was because there was already their culture that, like, the thing with, washing their hands very carefully and avoiding infection and such, they were already doing that for other stuff, so their infection rate was low for other stuff before COVID and for COVID during COVID. And, you know, they were East Asian. So it's not like East Asians were just running around purposefully infecting people with this thing. That at the same time, like, sometimes, conservatives would say, oh, I mean, COVID doesn't exist, but it is East Asians spreading it. It's like, just, yeah, freaking fascism. Let's see. I want to say it's fascism. That essay, Umberto Eco, points out, in under fascism, the enemy is always simultaneously extremely powerful and unbeatable, but also really weak and will beat them in no time. Because if they were not really powerful, then not everyone would need to really put in a lot of effort. They could be like, somebody else is taking care of that. But if it wasn't weak, then it's like, well, why would we bother fighting? We're not going to defeat them anyway. Right, I really appreciate it. This is a show where, sometimes, like, in part, this is definitely made for young people, I don't know if teenagers necessarily, but certainly young people, like 20-somethings maybe. That becomes very clear. And in some of those, sometimes they'll just not have, like, parental figures at all because, they're going to get in the way of the adventure. And sometimes they'll have them, but they'll just be, like, cartoon characters of, like, because, like, I appreciate sometimes it appeals to younger people to see, parents that are just impossible. I just don't understand, kind of thing, But yeah, I really appreciate it here. That's just not what they do at all. We meet Riri's mom, Ronnie, and every step of the way, like, I'm not going to say that I necessarily agree with everything she says and does, but I always felt like, when she's perhaps being, tough and such, you can tell, yeah, it's because she, it's that there's a philosophy that says you have to be tough on your kids, under certain circumstances where perhaps some of us would say no. Obviously, I am a big believer in, you gotta set some boundaries with your kids. It's actually, I I don't remember the name, but at least one, like, I'm guessing psychologist or psychiatric trained, anyway, they did research. They found out, basically, if you don't set boundaries, that person is going to keep looking for boundaries until they encounter something. That's how sometimes you'll meet people in real life, or hear about them at least, that are just still like spoiled children. Trump is a really good example. He never, like, when he was a kid, there weren't enough boundaries, and now he's just trying to do everything. Like, some of the things he does, like, I struggle to believe that even he himself thinks that this is going to be of benefit to him. Like, am I really going to say it? Okay. Big, beautiful Bill Act. Jesus. When you look at some of the things, Lee Jamila fairly recently did a fantastic summary. In general, excellent channel she's got. I'm sorry, some of the stuff, I'm like, does Trump himself believe that this is going to benefit even himself? Like, I'm not saying that he cares about anyone but himself, but some of this stuff, it's like, it's so obviously just extremely detrimental. And I think there is some chance that Trump is still just waiting for Dad to show up and say, no, Donnie, you can't do that, so that he can finally have some boundaries. He keeps, there keeps not being consequences for what he does. I guess I should be careful about what I say about him. He is extremely litigious. I don't want to get sued by him. Although, I suppose, we know about his habits on Twitter. I'm not calling it X. I guess maybe if the only time I got to sleep was during court, maybe I'd be involved in thousands of court cases too. I think that might be about... I'll check that later. I'll check that now. Now is technically later. I didn't say much later. And it's nothing I have to deal with. Okay. Let's see. I think the... yeah, I thought they did a really great job on Ronnie. And they do acknowledge, that is something I've heard from a number of black people. Black parents can be very, they really set boundaries, and in general, like, a lot of minority parents. And it is, of course, because they're worried for their kids, which doesn't always mean that, there's some amazing stories out there about parents who did push it too far. I'm afraid, for some reason, I can't quite recall off the top of my head, but I'm sure, I would be shocked if there hadn't been, like, lists compiled of, like, here's a story about a minority parent who, who's... hold on. I have heard... I want to say Joy Luck Club is one of them. I gotta watch that movie. Anyway, and there was one with Denzel as the dad from years ago that's gotten a lot of positive attention also for that aspect. Anyway, let's see. I felt like they did a really good job of, like, there's essentially like a tapestry. The various characters in and around Riri, and yeah, like, she'll talk to multiple people and get advice on different things. It is very much, there is a celebration of community, and that is something we really, really need today. We got to get away from this individualist crap of, like, one person who's especially smart or strong or a lot of times rich is going to solve all our problems. No, I get why that was a fantasy for a while. I get that there was a time where it sold really well. I suppose it might still sell fairly well for at least some, but by today we realize no, we have to work together. And a lot of the times these individualist stories are capitalist propaganda. It's meant to keep you a nice malleable worker drone, one who doesn't speak up, because you're not the individualist, you're not the individual, it's your boss that's the individual. You just have to do what he says. You don't want to be responsible for him not being able to save the world, do you? That is one thing. It's very rare for me to be grateful to Elon Musk for much of anything. Don't get me wrong, I'm in favor of electric cars, but you know what? Watch Cavernacle's videos on Elon Musk. He spells out exactly why I do not, yeah. He's gotten a lot of credit for things that he didn't deserve credit for. Cavernacle will provide the details if you watch his videos. One thing I will say, I think Musk has done a lot, albeit unintentionally so, to kill the myth of, the individual coming to save us all. Because for a while, a lot of people thought he would be that individual. And yeah, we're seeing more and more, it's kind of the opposite. Like, you give one person with that little self-control and self-awareness that much power, and yeah, yeah, screw Doge. I think that might just about be... I feel like there's something else that I wanted to make sure to say in this video. Let's see. I think I've said as much about the concept. I don't know that I'm going to get more into the characters. I guess I'll briefly say I'd like to see basically everyone who acted in this in something else. Like, obviously I've seen, Riri herself, the actress, also played that same role in Wakanda Forever. I'd like to see her play something else. And yeah, I guess I will just briefly say, yeah, I think, so her name is Lyric Ross. I'm going to make absolutely sure that I didn't get that wrong, because I don't want to be... Yeah. Fantastic job. And right, Anthony Ramos. Yeah, Dominique Thorne playing Riri Williams, still incredible. Yeah, I'm going to try to avoid just, like, reading aloud all the names. I guess I do want to say also Alden Ehrenreich. Fantastic. Really happy to get to see him in more. I've liked him in everything I've seen him in. And I think that covers what I'm going to say. Yeah. Let's see. That was it for that. I do want to talk about the ending. And I'm not going to spoil it, because that is definitely going to be, like, I've heard from people who loved it and people who hated it. I loved it. I definitely thought it was the exact right kind of thing to do. Yeah, I'll leave it at that because if I talk too much, you'll eventually be able to deduce what it is. But one of the major complaints I've heard is that at least one person... You know what? I guess I will just say, yeah, Nando. I think it's the Nando cut. Yeah. he talked about the ending. Also note that he some of his videos on the show do spoil. At least one of the one talking about the ending spoils the ending. Although I guess it's not a huge surprise. But he expressed the opinion that they are not going to follow up on the ending, and I agree. If they don't, that is really too bad. I think they will. I lay out ways that I could imagine them doing it in my video on the right. I haven't mentioned that until now. I did a video on each episode, all 6 episodes. I did a video on each where I talk spoilers about that episode and sometimes the ones before it. And yeah, I think they could follow up on it. I agree it would be terrible if they don't. I think, provided that they do, I think there's a, yeah, I really, really loved that ending. And I don't think it's gonna like destroy. It's just gonna be frustrating, but there's no like character that's gonna be destroyed if they don't follow up on the ending. I think that might just about be. Let's see. Is there anything at all? Let's see. Yeah, that might be each and every. I guess I'll just briefly talk about. So, if you know the comics, they've definitely, there's certain things that are very different for Riri compared to there. And I think they did a good job of, like, adjusting. I guess I don't know if I want to give away. I don't think I will spoil the comics in this video. I'll just say, I thought that it was satisfying way to change things around. I've long appreciated that the MCU doesn't try to just do everything the same as the comics. I like when they do things that are very similar to the comics, but I don't think everything should be. I think that's a pitfall some other comic book movies fell into. Yeah, I think that might cover everything. Yeah, that that does cover this. So the yeah, I rate this 8 suits out of 10 that Riri is gonna make sure to make iconic. That's how she puts it. But I mean, also ironic. Even though it's not really iron, it's more of like a mix of multiple.